no attainment, no accomplishment, no goal, no matter how many hoops you jump through, no matter how well you do in the rat race, no matter what great product you buy or how shiny it is or how much better than the neighbors it is, nothing's going to fix that sense of inadequacy. Because that sense of not being good enough cannot be fixed by anything. I won't even say anything out there. I'll just say anything. It's not a thing that's being wanted. It's not a thing that's needed. It's not a thing that can make you feel adequate, good enough, and give you worth. Because this sense of worthlessness, this idea that you are a me that is not good enough, is not true. So, since this lie is a lie, you can't solve it. The lie will persist. Nothing can bring down a lie because it can keep lying. It's not reality. So you can stick something in the hole, but the hole itself is not really there. It's a lie. And the only way to be free of being the slave of this lie and having your entire life standing for jumping through hoops to try to soothe this sense of inadequacy, the only way out of this rat race is to stop telling the lie and admit the truth. That this person, this me, who doesn't compare, who's not as good as he or she should be, is just an idea, is not even who you are, doesn't even exist in reality.
One thing you might as well face up to, sooner rather than later, in order to possibly save yourself from a whole lot of suffering and disappointment, the result of which would be intending to compel you towards the same realization that I now try to impart on you through wisdom anyway, is that you are eventually going to have to learn how to establish complete independence from all the factors in your reality stream of projected content that you currently use in an attempt to try and uphold some idea of contentment via attachments. Unless, of course, you enjoy the suffering and disappointment. Don't get me wrong. I know that many of you are in no rush to establish inner peace and are far from having their fill of extreme emotions. It's not terribly surprising because, first of all, it feels good to emote, and secondly, to get emotional about our feelings and sensations is a gratifying validation to the ego. But the ego is what complicates the whole thing, as feelings are not supposed to serve as mere novelty props to assist the false sense of self in sustaining its delusion. Feelings and sensations are meant to be experienced, not grasped. They are experiential phenomena that can possibly help clarify our attention. That's why we have feelings in the first place, besides their raw functionality of serving as beacons of survival. We appreciate feelings and sensations as they lend resonance to existentiality. And yet, due to this very appeal, they do have the potential to lead to grasping if one isn't careful to remain detached. But being detached doesn't mean we should try to stop feeling, as the recognition of feelings as a visceral thrill is part of the normative condition. And from the standpoint of non-existential numbness, or the nothingness of potentiality essence, any kind of feeling is encouraging. Initially, we hunger to receive sensations of any and all kinds to satisfy a dormant sense of being that is inherent in the non-being of true self. Indeed, even pain feels good to feel, despite what the chatter in the consciousness is telling us. So just plain sensations are not the problem. The real problem in all this, the one that causes all the psychological anguish, is the emotional indulgence. That is, trying to find inner peace through grasping attachments, aka using the wrong tool for the wrong job. Of course, there are many who don't want to let go of their attachments, even though they lead to suffering. The suffering state itself becoming an attachment, despite all our complaining, which in itself is even more expressions of attachment. The complaining is just empty lip service. For good or bad, we don't engage in applications that we do not find some kind of utility in. Or if not, then we actually seek to find an alternative way. So it may take some time before one is ready for inner peace, because emotional indulgences are addicting. And complaining about it is addicting. Not to mention the thinking narrator so enjoys being a victim. Because the victim mentality also feels good and is another form of grasping. But establishing inner peace won't include the vanquishing of feelings and sensations. Feelings and sensations don't go anywhere because they are an innate feature of the illusory ego. They are a natural process of the imagined biology. So it isn't even possible to push them out of the ego, as the ego is a perceiver of feelings. Feelings are gonna come and go, no doubt about it. But the freedom of the existential agency allows for choosing how we will react to these sensations. This is where emotions come into play, and are the indulgent pathos, or hedonism as the case may be, of the false sense of self. Feelings are just various signals in a nervous system. The emotions are the narratives the illusory ego assigns to these signals. It's significant to appreciate the difference here. Feelings are signals that mostly serve to attract or repulse. The emotions are the story we tell ourselves about what these signals mean in our contextualized snapshot. The signals are out of our hands, the qualities of which are self-evident, and are mostly handled instinctively. The emotions, however, are the attachment factors that are optional, depending on whether we are setting out to establish inner peace or to foster a state of psychological distress. Inner peace means that the mind is at a state of rest, no matter what feelings come and go. Psychological distress means that the default state of a clear mind at rest is instead filled with disturbances of one type or another as a result of attachments. That is, desiring to sustain certain circumstances or desiring to avoid certain circumstances, based on thinking narrative about the implications of the meaning of the feelings to the false sense of self. And when we speak about a clear, pure mind at rest, it should be noted that this doesn't mean happiness, fulfillment, reciprocation, or gratification, as these are all still emotion-based attachments, but simply means the mind is in the empty state. The empty state is not easy to establish, but the freedom and peace that results from it far surpasses any possible mundane pleasure that can be indulged in by way of feelings or emotions. The empty state of the clear mind seems an uncomfortable prospect for most, because establishing it requires letting go of reliance on grasping, and not many have a frame of reference for this. So it's a move into uncharted territory. What we could say the practical goal of this endeavor would be is independence from codependency. And when I say codependency, this isn't only a referral to strictly codependent human relationships, although I mean that too, but also expanded to mean all possible flawed relationships one can possibly establish within the field of perceptual content. This is when we seek validation of the ego by detrimentally becoming over-reliant on certain personal relationships, activities, consumptions, circumstances, and conditions to uphold an idea of satisfied self-identification, despite the weakness this causes becoming more and more fortified. These are considered dysfunctional relationships because they help to maintain a delusional state by supporting the idea of an existence of a false sense of self, that is, the illusory ego, its place in an illusory context, that is, the projected phantom world, and its so-called well-being, which is conditional to a plethora of fluctuating externalized illusory factors, all of which do not represent even an inkling of the truth. If we have sufficiently let go of all things, and have ceased to put stock in grasping as our default mode of being, what inevitably develops will be the empty state. This is the challenge before us, embracing the empty self. And when I say the empty self, or the empty state, this isn't a reference to an identification with a reduction to a more simplified inventory item, or to a devotion to denial, avoidance, or minimalism, but to the acceptance that the fundamental essence of our being is without distinction, that our source is nothingness, that is to say, a pure potentiality, a static unified field of open possibilities, non manifest, and uncommitted. And I know this seems very daunting to many of us because it asks us to find comfort without support. It asks us to be at peace without relying on anything to sustain the peace. It asks us to put down roots where no roots can find ground. It may seem undesirable, and a truth that repulses our tender sensibilities. But this is only because we don't want to accept ourselves for what we really are. And no peace can ever be found or established if we don't accept the truth of our empty self unconditionally.
The only way out of this rat race is to stop telling the lie and admit the truth. That this person, this me, who doesn't compare, who's not as good as he or she should be, is just an idea. Is not even who you are. Doesn't even exist in reality.